So, like, inversely, then, who are the kinds of people that really shouldn't ever consider getting into the field?
Someone who runs a different pace of life, a slower pace of life. Like, I have a friend who's successful, and I'm always like, if I had a little bit of your slowness and chill, because I'm pretty amped up human, I would have a better quality of life. And he goes and says, if I had a little bit of your energy, I would be a little bit more successful in my business. And so I'm like, it's not about work ethic, because everyone that shows up to work, I believe, wants to work. Typically, if you don't like what you work, you're there for either the money or for the people. Otherwise, find another job. So typically people come in and you're like, okay, I like to work and I like how much they pay me. And there's always room for growth. And so Escrow and Title always provides the fact that you could get a title officer position and you're desirable. You're a commodity that isn't expandable. And so there is security there. So once people come in, you're like, oh, I could do this. And so there's everyone that's college and, multiple degree educated to someone who's a college dropout and does the same work, but it's the personality and the human that is like, okay, this is the person's made for this work. And so, yeah.
That's an interesting way to frame it. And I like it, because one of the things, and I know we're going to talk about this next time you're on the show a little bit more, is that it really does seem like it's, well, you're part of a corporate structure. You have a supervisor, district manager, I'm sure, but you seem to operate as if you're largely self-employed.
Yeah, I've never had a commission paid job before. As a title officer, you get a salary and you're like, hey, this is what your salary, which equates to a certain hourly, and we want you to work overtime. And you're like, sweet, I get to make as much money because there's always the title work is there's always work to do.
Right.
There's not enough and there's a high volume. And so I guess to answer your question briefly, I don't know how to answer your question briefly. Can you repeat it, to be honest?
Oh, it's just like, it seems like you're self-employed.
Oh, yes. Okay. So yeah. So where did I go with that? This is the first time I'm self-employed. So when I jumped into my role as a sales guy, it is self-employment. Like especially First American, as a startup, they say, hey, this is what you owe us every month. And you pay your dues. And then from there, we have the ability to save money and squirrel it away for a new office like we just did. We're opening up next week on Monday.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that's where it is a little governance of ourselves and our time and our energies and what we do and the service we provide. It is very like I wake up every morning and do whatever I want to do. It's
And that probably means that there are some days where you're like, well, I choose to work till 10 at night because I need to or I get to.
100%. And I'm a part-time dad, and so I have my kids one week, I have my kids, no kids the other week, and my workflow absolutely ebbs and flows. And that's where structuring of your time, and we'll talk about this, is my greatest strength. Like my superhero power, I've got two of them. And one of them is time management. And so that, that's where it is the entrepreneurial word. It's like, it is on me. Like my escrow, like we were talking about, my escrow officer can go and meet agents everywhere. And I meet people all the time who don't really need me, but they really need a good escrow closer.
Right.
And so my role is to then remove myself as this position of, hey, I could bring you something because you've already told me. So let me see where I could supplement with a service. It's, it's catering to people where they're individually at.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to frame it. So moving on to a different kind of question then. People who are in the field, whether they're new or maybe they've been in there for a little while, what are some of the pitfalls that are common in title and escrow?
Well, title and escrow and real estate in general, I think when people think that it's black and white, very little is black and white.
Okay.
Because there's so many instances where it's you choose your own adventure, and we roll with the adventure that as we encounter it. And so that's one of my biggest pitfalls as a title officer. I'd come in and say, and with the mindset of like, it's either one side or the other. It's either a liability or it's not. It's either an issue or it is not an issue. But we want the transaction to keep moving. And so I learned that, hey, what applied to yesterday's interaction and transaction and situation looks very similar, but if you look at this one little tiny nuance detail changes everything. And so that is where it's a little bit tricky in the sense that, man, there's a lot of unexpecteds.
All these small little details.
Yeah, it's a choose your own adventure, but you're also like, it's like a pinball rolling down a hill. You're like, which way are we going to go? It depends on what we encounter in the histories or with people's families or whatever the situation is. Like I had one where the buyers said, can we move it on a Friday? Even though we're like closing on Monday. And the seller was like, sure, I don't live there. It was my dad's estate. Well, second son comes on a Saturday and say, what are you doing moving to my dad's house?
Right.
And he's like, we're closing on Monday. We like paid the money already. And that is something that you have to pivot. And typically people don't want to hold on to homes. No one cares about the home. They care about the money.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, who's getting paid? That changes. And that's not an uncommon situation where it changes last minute. Something comes up, life events or discoveries. Or so like we look for elder abuse. And so some things we're like, you have to be like a little bit able to change directions and be able to compensate and accommodate and work with people. It's working with people.
Elder abuse, is that a common concern?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we see a lot of abuse, and then that's a fraud. That's a type of fraud. But yeah, we see a lot of that.
Oh. Is that just like the kids want the estate and mom and dad maybe aren't in the most? Oh, they're not all there?
Well, I think statistically, the most people that are going to rob you are people you know. Like, especially identity theft. Like, I think they say, like, identity theft typically primarily happens by people you know. And so when the opportunity is there and the relationship is strained and it looks like it's easy, even a good person will be tempted by a cheat.
Right.
And so we have to be aware of that, and we play a place to uphold, the say, I don't know the way, but to me, the legitimacy of the transaction is what title and escrow is primarily concerned about. Like, we're insuring people's ownerships, we're insuring people's investments.
Because you really are like at the very end of that train track, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, and people do all sorts of things to get away with all sorts of things. And so title and escrow sometimes have to be the bearer of bad news. But then how do you facilitate that? That matters as well.
Are you able to give us an example of like sometimes where like they're just about to finish up, but then like something really wrong has just been identified?
Yeah. So here in Washington State, to be a personal representative or as an executive of an estate, you can't be a felon.
Really?
No, yeah. It disqualifies you from serving in that capacity. Now, what if your felon record is in California? And now you're selling mom's house here, and your brother from Michigan says, wait, why is she signing? Did you guys know that she's a felon? And we're like, hold the phone.
That's rough.
Because we check, as a title officer, I'm going to check every name. Are you a felon? I'm looking for ways to disqualify. I'm always a title officer. I'm looking for ways to be like, this is an issue. This is how and that's one of them. And running people's backgrounds, and we sleuth people a little bit to see, hey, are you even reliable to sign on behalf? Because the law may allow this much, but if we're insuring and we're paying out money, man, we have a very narrow door that you have to fit through. And oftentimes people change shapes like that. And it happens where it's like, hey, we have a disqualified. And the courts don't run for that. The courts say, are you a felon? Sign this and say you're not, because we don't have this man staff to search every single person that files a suit. So they're like, and that's fraud in the courts. So then for us, it starts a whole different and the buyer is like, wait, what? It's extended because of this. I mean, that's the pitfalls that happen. Now, if you are not using a title company and you just take that deed, like that's a situation where the brother was like, you don't have a house, because that's fraudulent. And the courts will say, yeah, you don't have a house anymore. And so that's where, if you took a deed in that sort of manner from an estate, and the state representative says, hey, here's the court order that gives me the powers to sign, it's legitimate. But in our sense, we have to go the extended mile and say, is it still legitimate because it was 4 months ago?
Right.
Or did you just get convicted as a felon for fraud and stealing and forgery in California, and your brother was like, that's his history, you know, and that does happen. Or people come out of the woodwork and say, whoa, my dad, I'm like a son from my dad's first. I'm a child from my father's or my mother's high school pregnancy. And they have this family now and he's deceased and they're getting all the money. And well, not anymore because we just discovered you.
Right.
And now you own 50, you know, you're entitled to 50% of that estate. So that changes everything. And those are the kind of things that title and escrow are imperative. And lenders are like, I'm not going to give money until I'm insured that I could give you money.
Right. That sounds like that's, again, like I call back to this insurance fellow that I was talking to before, where like when something bad happens, sometimes they have to bring bad news. Mm-hmm. And then that can suck. Mm-hmm. And I imagine when you have to put on that hat, that can probably bring out some of the worst in people.
Yeah, but as a Russian kid, I grew up translating for my parents. And so I took these concepts that are, you know, adultish, and they're telling a 13 or a 12-year-old, and the 12 or 13-year-old is then going to tell it to these adults who would need to make a decision. I learned how to take concepts, digest them, and translate them into a way that's relatable and understandable.
That's a good skill.
And that's a skill that I'm realizing with title insurance. Man, there are ways to use words. Like I've heard, like I called it title poetry because I discovered that there's a way to talk that gives me the outcome that I want.
Right.
I've heard coworkers get off the phone and in my head, I'm like, man, why did you use the words that you used? Because I now have additional questions and I know the job. Right. And that doesn't help. I'm now frustrated on behalf of the person that doesn't even exist in my head. Like I just know that you talk to them. Mm-hmm. So that made me a valuable asset at both companies with the escrow side of things. Because do you go to title officer ABC or do you go to Sergey, who I know will formulate the explanation in a way that people can be diffused because it's all figure outable. There's nothing scary, but the unknown for any capacity is always scary. So the more people know, the more knowledgeable, the better buyers they seem to be. And so
I heard a line once from it was a marketing course that I was going through passively. And he had a good line where it was that the people who sell the most aren't the ones that are selling the cheapest product. They're not even selling the best product. They're selling the most understandable product.
Mm-hmm.
That's stuck with me. And I think it's true.
And the rarity of a title officer becoming an account manager is non-existent in my industry.
Really?
Because title officers like to be behind a screen for many, many hours. Like I would blow through books because I'd be like, okay, boom, boom, headphones in. I'd go through 4 books a month on long book months.
That's awesome.
Because the job requires you to be constantly examining. Mm-hmm. And so there's no human interaction. And the right person, man, like I struggled with it because it wasn't made for me. But I was good at it because I was inquisitive enough, right. And I kind of like it. I like, you know, people say, "Oh, you swallow the toad or the turtle," whatever the expression is. You know, like I like the hard work. So when it was difficult, because I like people, I made a way to use my people skills in a manner that made me invaluable, and I was able to communicate these concepts to foreign buyers, sellers, old people that are like, "What is this?" I bought a house when I was 20, now I'm 80, I'm selling a house. What am I doing? And you want what, how, the questions, everything. Man, you could derail someone's business practice as an agent who's worked with these old folks. You could derail that relationship by being ununderstandable or unrelatable or not helpful.
And what's funny is that you could be entirely right in what you are telling them. You're very clinical, very accurate, but it's like at a certain point, a client can only have a valuable conversation with a doctor if it's at a certain level. Once you pass that threshold.
Yes. And when I became a title officer or a commercial title officer, I learned really quickly by someone's expression that every email I send is a bill that he gets. Every phone call I make is a bill that he gets. So enough of the emails, enough of the phone calls. And I was like, oh, that's a consideration of every client now that I work with. And so I was able to adapt and change my practice that also grew our business because now it changes how the attorney is working with the title company. And there's a lot of intertwining there. We work very closely with a lot of attorneys. And so that really does matter. The human matters.
Yeah, that a good human element just makes all the difference.
Yeah, and there's another title officer that does what I do. So sometimes I do sit with people who bring me title reports with their clients, and it's not my title. It's not my transaction. But these people need help. And I'm like, okay, this is why I'm here. It doesn't pay me, but as a resource, like I give. And so.
Because ultimately it just betters off the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, because I'm building relationships as well. So let me help your clients as much as I can to give them an experience, because I know that's going to benefit the client. Like my client are agents. So I know that if I treat their clients good, it's going to reflect. It pays. It trickles.
It's funny. I was talking to, it was a bank manager, general manager of one of the, you know what? I won't say the name because that doesn't matter. But it was funny because they're like, hey, yeah, banks are all kind of the same. We can only vary our stuff so much. And so you know what we do? Whenever you call, you don't go to an answering machine. It's always someone that picks up and you can actually have a conversation with them.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, we talked about title insurance last time, where the industry had a moment in time where we relied heavily on offshore operations. And the service was so abysmal that all title company practices are like, let's bring it back to the States. Let's bring it back to the local people. Yeah. And so that stint offshore did nothing for the succession plan that we're looking at here in the next 8 years, where it's like we didn't replace anyone because we didn't have to bring anyone in. And
all right.
Are we going to job fairs? Nah. Maybe. I don't see anyone at a job fair, because how else do you hear about title and escrow? I have no idea. I'm in it.